Thank you. Good evening. I'm taking the meeting for Councillor Jane Norman. To start with, we're going to do housekeeping, and Karen is going to take that, please. Karen?
Yep. Welcome to the council meeting tonight. This meeting is being live streamed on the internet and recorded for archive purposes. Would all members and officers please switch off your cameras and microphones until called by the chairman to speak, except for cabinet members and group leaders. Should you wish to speak, would you please use the raise your hand function in Teams? Should the raise your hand function not work on your screen for any reason, please either indicate on screen your wish to speak or by using the chat facility. The Deputy Mayor requests that the chat facility is only used if there are connection issues or function issues, as the public are unable to see the chat facility, and requests that all discussions relating to the agenda be voiced in the meeting. Again, should you have any difficulties during the meeting, please contact the Democratic Services Officer separately. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If we could start with apologies for absence then, please. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Councillors Christine Cave and Andrew R.T. Davis.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay. And I know the councillor.
Councillor Jane Norman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilkinson. No one else? Okay, if we could move on to the roll call of members then, please.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Good evening, members. I'm going to start with the roll call. Commencing with Councillor Julie Aviat.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Vince Bailey.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Rhiannon Birch.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Jonathan Bird.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Bronwyn Brooks.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Liz Burnett.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor George Carroll.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Janice Charles.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Amelia Collins.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Jeff Cox.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Rob Crowley.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Pam Drake.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Vince Driscoll.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Stuart Edwards.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Ben Gray.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Owen Griffiths.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Stephen Griffiths.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Tony Hampton.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Sally Hanks.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Nick Hodges.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Hunter Jarvie.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Gwyn John.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Dr. Ian Johnson.
Present, I didn't do that again.
Councillor Gordon Kemp.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Peter King.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Kevin Marnie.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Catherine McCaffer.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Anne Moore.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Neil Moore.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Michael Morgan.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Regent Nugent Finn.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Andrew Parker.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Bob Penrose.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Sandra Perks.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Andrew Robinson.
It's Robertson. Present,
Apologies,
nothing
Robertson.
to declare.
Councillor Leighton Rowlands.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Ruba Sivignanum,
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor John Thomas,
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Neil Thomas,
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Stephen William,
Presennol a dim byd i'w ddatgan.
Councillor Margaret Wilkinson,
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Eddie Williams,
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Mark Wilson,
Present and nothing to declare.
and Councillor Margarita Wright.
Present, nothing to declare.
That concludes the roll call, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. All right, if we move on to item 3, please. Review of strategic leadership team structure, which is a cabinet report from the 13th of September of this year. I'm going to hand over to the leader, Neil Moore, to take this, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. As you know, this is a report and is a reference from the Cabinet of the 13th of September. There are some recommendations which I will mention in a minute, but I think it's right just to remind people where this came from. We originally had a Cabinet on the 12th of May, which set this in train. It went then to Corporate Performance and Resources on the 19th of May, where it was discussed and other group leaders agreed it was highly appropriate and timely for a management review to take place. Also, it's relevant that there's been many meetings since then with leaders, with the senior leadership team, with the department management team and the trade unions, along with the recent report to scrutiny corporate performance. In essence, the report sets out the findings of the recent analysis of the Council's senior management structure. The report proposes a high-level organisation structure to deliver the ambitious agenda set out in the Corporate Plan 2025 and how the organisation would work in the future. The report also proposes the immediate structure changes required. As you are aware, this is not my report. This is a report being prepared by independent consultant Steve James, who is here with us tonight. He's an external HR consultant, and he will be presenting a report to full council should you agree a standing orders agreement. Just for the record, I do agree that these changes are necessary in order to carry out the functions of the authority to the best standards and to remain the best performing authority in Wales. But I will ask council to waive standing orders to allow Steve James to make his presentation to council. But before I do that, I will actually just formally move that the proposed reorganisation of the first and second tier structure, including the new and changed roles, are detailed in report be approved, that the deletion and creation of the following posts in line with the detail contained in the report and as part of the proposed structure be approved, and recommends that A, the deletion of the post managing director, B, the creation of a post of chief executive, C, the creation of the post of Director of Corporate Resources, and D, the creation of post of Director of Place. And thirdly, that the proposed consultation process and implementation timetable be noted. I'll do that formally, and I will ask for council's approval to suspend standing orders in order for Steve James to make his presentation, if you can. What I would like to do is ask Steve to do that now, but Deputy Mayor, I would like to just conclude my opening remarks after he spoke, because I think it's relevant to be listened to the presentation before I finalise my opening remarks. Thank you, Mayor. So can I formally move those recommendations and ask council to suspend standing orders to allow Steve James to present to council?
Thank you. Right, you've made the recommendations. Councillor Burnett, did you wish to come in?
If I could just formally second those recommendations and reserve my right to speak later in the debate. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So I'll be happy to waive standing orders in order to allow for the presentation. Councillor Marnie.
Yeah, having read the 23 pages of drivel, I'd like to oppose adopting the standing orders personally. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else wish to speak on that? Does anyone else wish to oppose the waiving of standing orders? Councillor Ian Johnson.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I think it's important that we hear the presentation, and I think it'd be rather a waste of time with this meeting if we were not to hear the reasoning behind the proposals being made.
I would concur with that, Madam Mayor.
Right, so what did I say? We need 50% of members to be present, and then we need a simple majority to accept that we are going to waive standing orders. Are people happy to do this on a show of hands, or do they wish to do a roll call? Is there anyone else who...
Perhaps it would be easier if anybody wishes to object, they say so now, and therefore you know if there's a minority or majority.
Yes, so far we have one person opposing this. Does anyone else wish to oppose it? No, in that case, we will waive standing orders and accept the presentation, please. Councillor Neil Moore, if you would like to introduce the presentation.
Thank you. Can I introduce Steve James? He's the independent HR consultant who we've employed. I know Steve's met with many people before, and I know that he's made some presentations in the past to the leaders and to scrutiny, but this is one for full council members to see. So, Steve, over to you, please.
Thank you very much. And as you say, I've met many of you over the last month or so during this work. For those that I haven't met, good evening. Steve James, I'm the consultant commissioned to carry out this review. And as the leader says, the cabinet report and the recommendations are effectively my findings from the work that I've done over the last couple of months, talking to 360-degree view of the organisation. I think there are some slides to go through. Matt, if you can get them up for us, thank you very much. So this is background to the report and the thinking behind it, and kind of leading to those recommendations. We go on to the first slide. So the main drivers, as the leaders indicated already, were largely strategic in nature and are around the assurance to members of the delivery of the corporate plan and ensuring that the leadership structure was fit for purpose in that context. And also kind of stress testing that structure, not just against the need for compliance against new legislation, but also maximising the opportunities that the new legislation creates. So that's both the clear need to establish a chief exec that's in the new legislation, but also the creation of corporate joint committees, which alongside kind of the city deal and the growth deal structures are the main vehicles of Welsh Government driving regional development, regeneration, and the wider kind of place agenda. So that was an important part of that kind of compliance legislation view of the degree of kind of fit for purpose. And then there was also an element of applying a post-COVID lens on the structure and looking at what has been learnt and the positives from that, and where those could be built upon. So that was kind of pretty much the drivers for the review. If you can move on, Matt, thank you. So what I've found is a council that works well, in my opinion, very well, and deserves many of the plaudits that it's got. And the recommendations that flow from the report are therefore not about fixing things that are broken, but enhancing what's there and building on the capacity and the capability for the future. And in particular, in areas where the greatest opportunities for development and growth and transformation lie. The baseline position is very sound. It's an effective and well-run council, performs well, meets targets, operates within budgets. It's well-run, well-led, and from a staff perspective, there are good levels of engagement from everybody that I've spoken to. and a very stable workforce. Average length of service is very good. And an SLT, so the senior leadership team, has a good feel to it. It's come together well through COVID, and are working as a team more to deliver service collaboratively as a result of the issues that they've had to face and the business critical need to work collaboratively. So all of those things are real positives. And I think leadership is well thought of across the organisation, both as leaders and as drivers of change. However, on the right-hand side of the slide, there are some question marks there. Austerity has cut deep, and that's very apparent. And the feedback that I've had has been consistent that services are at minimum threshold levels in terms of resourcing, and further cuts in those areas could impact or would impact on service delivery. So there's a fine balance there, but also that kind of as a consequence of austerity and successive restructures that have led to an organisation somewhat by default rather than design. Tactical decisions made in order to address budget issues, tactical decisions around keeping posts vacant or deleting posts when they become vacant, have resulted in elements potentially disappearing, not being replaced, and that has then been accentuated over the last 12 months, I think, by some pay issues, and I think that's something that management will need to look at a little further, in particular around concerns of turnover in key areas, key specialist areas, and potentially around kind of recruitment and pay issues there. So those things have accentuated some of those gaps in capability and capacity. I think there's still, or has been in the conversations that I've had, a lot of references to siloed, insular behaviours, but I don't feel that that's about a lack of willingness to work together. As I said before, kind of working through the pandemic has proved that that's not the case as far as senior leadership team is concerned. I think it's more about the prioritisation or their prioritisation, and the balance between directorate and corporate need from finite resources and making those sorts of judgments. But I think as a consequence of that directorate focus and largely kind of operational focus, some of those strategic priorities contained within the corporate plan, the bigger programs of change have tended to be underpowered as a result. And particularly where they're not within a directorate's clear ownership. And as a result of that, I think some of those strategic decisions get diluted. And that's not helped by the fact that I think the managing director role as currently configured is clearly spread very thin, and in my view too thin. And as a consequence of that, spends far too much time looking inward and managing the organisation rather than externally, and leading more strategically and playing that kind of ambassadorial role almost, rather than managerial role that you would normally expect of a leader at that sort of level. But that's a consequence of design rather than anything else. If you could move on the slide, please. So what I heard very consistently, I think, was an organisation with a tension between focusing on the day-to-day delivery of services and the need to move the big strategic agendas forward that are contained within the corporate plan. And underlying that is a sense that achieving those broader strategic objectives isn't going to be achieved through the current organisational design and the current way of working at a leadership level. So I think that the Vale is successful at delivering services within budget to a high standard. That's clear and apparent. And the org design that currently is there achieves that through focusing predominantly on operational delivery from a largely functional structure. And the strategic pressure that's there to meet not just increased demand, but kind of the response to national, regional opportunities for growth and development, and in particular the creation of the corporate joint committees and the increased partnership working that comes with that, I think is going to require change to be managed beyond the current directorate structure and done on a more corporate basis, on a more cross-cutting basis. If you can move the slide on, thank you. Now that picture is then reinforced when you look at the detail of the annual delivery plan, and when you look at the 350 odd specific actions within the delivery plan, nearly 2/3 of those are strategic in nature and typically related to either the wider place agenda, so things like climate change, development, regeneration, or around the internal corporate transformational changes linked to digitization, customer service transformation, new ways of working. But these actions are typically kind of driven separately and within directorates, rather than as part of a clear program of activity with director level ownership of those programs. And therefore, as a consequence of that, it's fairly vertical, with little horizontal ownership and drive of those programs. Move the slide on, thank you. So at a high level, the report, my view, the findings are therefore the Vale does the basics well, very well, and is a good operational council with regards to the delivery of social services, education and skills, the environment services. But I think it struggles for a variety of reasons, and no fault assigned anywhere, but struggles for a variety of reasons to deliver the bigger programs of change. And in particular, those related to the strategies around place development, where the CJCs are concentrated: strategic planning, development, transport infrastructure, economic development, regeneration, climate change, and also the corporate transformation agenda around digitization, customer service, new ways of working. And to shift that balance, I think it will need some investment, and that investment needs to be in an enhanced strategic core to bring some grip and oversight to those, or to that cross-cutting activity, and to drive those changes through. And I don't feel that would happen just by changing the current managing director post to a chief exec and expecting him or her to then just fill that space. Next slide. But there is a prize there, and I think that prize is already embedded in the corporate plan. But without investment at a leadership level, the work that I've done, the conversations that I've had, the findings of that, I think indicate that there would be a risk to the delivery of those bigger programs that form a significant part of the longer term ambitions for the Vale. So at the beginning, the recommendations are therefore not about investing in the future. They're not about fixing things that are broken or about simple compliance. It's about kind of investment in the future. Next slide, please. So what does that mean for design? This is a complex slide, so I'll try and cover it reasonably clearly. My research shows that councils across Wales tend to adopt one of three high-level structural designs. So set it out here around two axes. The vertical axis are kind of the range between a very dispersed leadership to a very kind of targeted leadership with a small number of senior leaders. And then the horizontal axis is the range between kind of a clear operational focus to a more strategic focus. So the bottom left-hand corner include those councils that are largely operational and with a very dispersed leadership that results in a very flat functional hierarchy. And with regards to corporate resources in place, this is where I position the Vale currently, structurally, with regards to kind of its design of those particular services. The top left-hand corner is then still largely operationally focused, but with a very kind of tight leadership around typically a chief executive and a deputy chief exec or an assistant chief exec, who then have very flat, dispersed structures underneath them. The top right are then those councils that have strategic leadership at a director level in both the way that it leads its corporate resources and also its place agenda. And the asterisks, just for clarity, are where that leadership role also includes some or all of the frontline environmental services. And this is where the recommendations in the report go to propose that the Vale moves from that bottom left-hand corner to that top right-hand corner in terms of the way in which it structures its corporate resources and the way in which it structures its place services. And in doing that, creating a director of corporate resources to lead the functions as set out in the report, and also a director of place to lead the functions included in that role profile as well. And on the final two slides, I think you can see that in the change in structure from that very flat hierarchy to the right-hand side of that structure, everybody reporting into the managing director, to the next slide, thank you, where there's a clearer configuration around corporate resources and around place, with a director leading those agendas for all the reasons that I've kind of laid out in the earlier slides and presentation. I think the leader wanted to come back at the end of that, but that's the presentation. Thank you.
Can I thank you for the presentation, and also thank you for the amount of work that you've actually put in during the last 3 months and the number of times you've met with people. So quite clearly, the report and the presentation, which is important, I thought that everybody should see, sets out the findings, and it clearly proposed the high-level organisations restructure. And it's needed to deliver the corporate plan 2025, plus obviously the other issues in terms of things like regional capacity and regional agenda, and also the national agenda in many ways. It also proves that there's a development of leadership, and it's one of the things that I think is important as well in terms of this, is that it actually gives a structure for people to bed into. So before I'm just going to close by just giving some reminders actually of where we are, because I've been here for a long time, and some people may think too long, but there you go. In 96, 97, for example, we had 1 chief executive, 8 directors, and 4 superheads, and several operational managers and principal officers below them. Then in 2004-05, we had 1 chief executive and 6 directors, so we dropped them all, but there were 13 heads of service. Today, we have a managing director with 3 directors, so 8, 6 to 3. There are 14 heads, but 6 of which report directly to the managing director, plus, of course, the 3 directors which are reporting to him as well. And that's really too many reporting lines as far as I can see, and I agree totally with Steve's point here. And we need a strategic management, and strategic management needs to be focused, I think. You know, there's some reference in this report, and one of the things I liked about when the report shows where 60% of the delivery of the delivery plan, and that we've all agreed, 60% of it is strategic in nature. It's cross-cutting, it's multi-service, it's corporate transformation, it's climate change, it's digital transformation, it's transport and infrastructure, obviously the partnership, particularly in things like the city deal and the other things that are going to come forward, the CJCs, the community engagement, but more particularly, if we're going to do this, we have to have a cultural change. So I really cannot see our plans and our aspirations for this council being achieved within the current structure, no matter how good they are, because they are absolutely marvellous as a senior leadership team. But we need to formulate, as my opinion, the strategic leadership team. Otherwise, I think we will just simply manage decline. So I urge you to follow the recommendations. We've asked Steve, as the independent HR expert, to come forward. You know he's done a lot of work and he's given you his views. It's now up to you, council and council members, to consider those findings and consider whether or not you agree, as I do, the recommendations before you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In order to take the questions, we will need to go back to the standing orders now the presentation is finished, and then take any questions.
Madam Mayor, you're very quiet. I don't know if the mic needs to be in front of you a bit more.
Right, is that any better?
Excellent, thank you.
Right, okay, thank you. So we'll need to invoke standing orders now the presentation is finished so that we can take related questions. We're happy to do that. Right, excellent. Okay.
And I'm sure Steve, to be honest, will be happy to answer any questions too.
Right. Okay, well, can you make it clear who your questions are addressed to then if you do ask a question? So we'll start with Councillor Carroll, followed by Councillor Johnson.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and I'd like to begin by thanking both the leader and Steve for the meetings and briefings that they've given me and the other group leaders throughout this process. While there are aspects of the recommendations and the outcome of this review with which I disagree, I nonetheless am extremely grateful that that courtesy was extended, and I'd like to place that on the record and think that that was absolutely the right and proper way to go about this. In effect, Madam Mayor, the proposals that are before us this evening come in two parts. There's the less controversial aspect and I think the slightly more controversial aspect. From my point of view, I'm more than happy to support the proposed deletion of the managing director post and replacing it with the new post of chief executive. As the leader and Steve highlighted, there is a legislative requirement for this in the Local Government Wales Act, and to comply with that law, we need to make that change, and I'm happy to support that. My concerns, Madam Mayor, relate to points C and D that the leader raised, the creation of the Director of Corporate Resources and the creation of the Director of Place. I'd like to make quite clear that this is not in any way a reflection on council officers and the work that the existing senior leadership team are doing. I appreciate that they work incredibly hard. It's merely a fact, Madam Mayor, and I think it is an important fact, that the authority is facing cost pressures. Difficult decisions have been taken. We've seen council tax rises over many years. We've seen charges implemented for various services. And I think to justify the creation of 2 new posts on those sort of salaries at this time, with an estimated on cost for 2022-23 of some £280,000, is going to be very difficult. And I believe that when you take decisions as an authority, you do need to try and take the public and your residents with you on that. I don't think that I can justify that position to my residents. I appreciate that Steve has worked hard on this review and I thank him for the work that he's done. However, in light of those concerns, Madam Deputy Mayor, I would like to table an amendment to what the leader has proposed. That is the deletion of points C and D that would result in us not creating those additional director posts of Director for Corporate Resources and Director of Place, and I beg to move the amendment.
Do we have a seconder for the amendment?
Yes, Madam Mayor, second, Councillor Bailey.
Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor Ian Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will be speaking, of course, to the amendment as I'm assuming, and we'll be dealing with that first before we coming back to the substantive motion. I may wish to speak on the substantive motion later on. I am disappointed to see this amendment from Councillor Carroll and the Conservative Party. I think the Vale of Glamorgan Council is one which frequently changes hands in leadership, not just at elections, but between elections as well. In fact, I think 42 of the 47 councillors in this place have been part of the leadership of this council since 2017, since we were last elected. I'm one of the handful that hasn't been in charge, and therefore can speak frankly and freely about my views of the management. I'm quite disappointed by Councillor Carroll's position, which was highlighted last week in Corporate Resources, and also in a press release by Andrew R.T. Davies that I've seen in the papers, although he's sadly unable to talk about that himself here tonight. The Vale of Glamorgan is an anchor institution. We have a £400 million annual turnover. We have 5,000 members of staff. This is our senior leadership team capacity is hugely important in delivering the correct services to the people of the Vale of Glamorgan. We are the people that represent the Vale of Glamorgan. We're also the only organisation that stands up for the Vale of Glamorgan. Nobody else has that responsibility. Nobody else takes on that responsibility. It's therefore, I think, quite important that there is agreement on how the senior management team is organised, and therefore I'm disappointed that this has come forward as an amendment and there's not an agreement across the piece. As I think Councillor Moore pointed out, this is very much back to the future. Prior to organisation in 2012, I remember there being 5 directors at this council. I think that's probably the right amount for an organisation with a £400 million turnover. I think that as has been identified by the consultants, there's been too much internal focus, not enough opportunities taken externally. That might have been, as a result of austerity and retrenchment, that was a decision taken at the time. That might have been the wrong decision with hindsight. That's a different matter. I keep looking back, for example, at the 2013 application for Vibrant and Viable Places, which is a £15 million in investment in Barry Town Centre. I look at Barry Town Centre now and think, my gosh, wouldn't it have been great if we'd had that £15 million? Because when we're talking about the director of place role, for example, the success of that role will not be considered in the long run on how it shuffles money around, but what it brings into this council. It's what ambition is shown. It's how we get extra money. It's not about just delivering operationals or the operation. It's delivering other things that we want to do outside of it as well. And I say that in the context of something that's not been mentioned so far, which is the Levelling Up Fund, which is something the Conservatives want, something that's come from Westminster. It's something that our local MP in Barry, Alan Cairns, has talked about quite a lot in the last few months. He's talked about how this pot of money is available and something that we can get hold of. However, what you're doing by deleting this post in your amendment here is you are refusing to give us enough capacity to bring that money in. That's what the consultant has come and told us. They've said that you don't have the capacity. I can see Councillor Carroll shouting, and he can talk back later on, but this is the reality of it, that if we want to be ambitious, if we want to bring in more money, if we want to do more things, we need to have the capacity amongst our staff to do it, and that is what a director of place will do. So what we have here, and this is tawdry populism, and this is why I'm not going to support your amendments here, Councillor Carroll, is what you're doing. On the one hand, you have a Conservative MP standing there saying, look at all this money that you can get hold of, and on the other hand, with the Conservatives in the Vale of Glamorgan Council saying, no, you can't have the resources, no, you can't have the members of staff that will allow these things to happen. So you're trying to have the penny and the bun. I'm sorry, you can't have it both ways. What I do want to know is if you're going to delete these posts, and you've not given much of a reason as to why we shouldn't have those, other than to say that this is what we've got, so we should stick with it. I think it was Councillor Driscoll last week who said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, which is a really odd thing, I think, for an opposition councillor to say when talking about making improvements to the council. But if you don't want these posts, then I want to know, will you be participating in the recruitment for these roles when it's voted through later on by council? So I think there's a majority for this. Will you be removing these posts if you win the election next year in May, or will you be keeping these posts? And will, if you keep these posts, take no credit for anything they achieve? Because right now you're trying to stop them from doing the jobs that they've been recommended and suggested to do. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I'm not sure at the moment whether it's perhaps appropriate to sort of make points, but I had some particular questions that I wanted to ask the leader about the commissioning of this report. Did this go out to a tender process? And also, I'm just wondering, if not, how was Steve James appointed? And I'll be honest, perhaps I haven't taken the opportunity of reading the report, but I haven't really know much about his background, and it's been mentioned that it's HR. I don't know what other experience he has within local authorities. The other point I would make is I'm concerned. I know often a lot of play is made about the size of the council, and we've got to be honest. We're in a sort of middling range, and I'm just wondering whether the size of council can really justify what is effectively going to be a freestanding chief executive, with no other responsibilities under him in the sense of departments, etc. The other thing the matter that concerns me as well is we talk about austerity, and as far as that's concerned, we are, as has been mentioned, we are going to appoint 2 more directors who are going to take sort of £280,000. The figure that's been quoted, I don't know whether that's right or not. That obviously is bound to have an impact upon the delivery of services initially, and I'm concerned about that. That money has to come from somewhere. And the other point I was going to raise is what is going to happen below the level of the directors? Are we looking to keep the same number of heads of service, operational managers? Because obviously there's going to be no savings there. And finally, we have to ask ourselves, I think, what is going to happen to what's going to is the public going to see out of this? Because at the end of the day, the public wants to see better services. Is this going to achieve it? So those are the points I would make. It's a bit of a range across the board, I appreciate, but I'd be interested to hear some answers.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know if Councillor Moore would like to come back in and possibly bring Steve James in if you think it's appropriate.
Well, it possibly would be appropriate, but if I'm coming back, this isn't, you know, normally if it's to rebut or to answer some of the questions, yes, I'll come back. In terms of how we got to where we are, perhaps it would be a good idea if Councillor Kemp read the reports, because it's quite clear where we are and how we got there. Because we took this to Cabinet, we took it to corporate performance, we made it absolutely clear what we would be doing. We said that we would be going to Solace, who we worked with before, to ask them if they had any recommendations of HR consultants or whatever that they could recommend for us to consider. They did actually that, and there were 4 that they put forward. And as it said in the report, both the deputy leader and myself examined those individuals. We had brought it down to a short list of 2, interviewed the 2 in particular, and Steve, we thought, was the best person for the job, and I think he's proved that to be the point, quite honestly. In terms of Steve, he can probably talk for himself. He's not actually connected to the Solace group, as has been suggested elsewhere, which I think probably where you're trying to come from. He has set up his own private limited company. I think it's called Elive HR, and it provides HR support across the board. He's worked exclusively in other councils, like, for example, the most recent one I think is Birmingham, but previously he was with Deloitte, as I'm well aware of. So I think if Steve wants to add to that, he can. In terms of where we are below this level, again, if you read the report, it was quite clear that this was a strategic management review at the highest level, and that there were no suggestion as to what would come below it, because that would be something, and again, that's something which has been in the report and something that Steve has made clear in doing his presentations, that that would be down to the new directors or the directors across the board in conjunction with the strategic management team to consider what is appropriate elsewhere. And some suggestions have been made, yes, of things like we need to strengthen up our project team, particularly in terms of things like the 21st century schools, and things like our capital program needs to be reviewed and made sure it's done correctly. There was a consideration of whether or not the things were right when we changed at the last occasion and moved things like transportation and planning to under the neighbourhood services directorate, and whether or not it should be in the place, because I think maybe Steve would like to develop what he thinks about place, because I think it is important that we have the strategy to go forward, and the strategy has to be within the Director of Place Directorate, which isn't just going to be a siloed operation. It's going to be the strategy which covers the whole of the gambit of all of the authority. And without that strategic lead, we will be, as I said earlier, actually delivering nothing worthwhile. Ian has made some absolutely superb points, and I have to congratulate him on what he said, because he's absolutely right. In order to go forward, we have to do that. You asked about things like, will we have better services? Well, we ain't going to get better services unless we actually get our act together and make sure that we go forward of things like the CJC. And I'll give you an example. Next Monday, I think, or the Monday after, is the first transition board being considered in terms of the local CJC. So I can't make it any plainer that I think in order for us to move forward, we have to be strategic in our outlook, we have to be strategic in our thinking, and we can't do that with the current structure. I don't know if I covered all the points, but quite clearly, you haven't read some of the report as far as I can see, but I don't know whether Steve wants to rebut some of the comments that you made, because I think they were pretty low. Thank you.
Steve James, would you like to come in there?
Yeah, I kind of echo many of the points that Councillor Moore and Councillor Johnson made. To be honest, I think my background is as an HR director, as a consultant for 30 odd years now, and I've operated at kind of director level in a number of councils and in central government. And I've carried out a number of these sorts of reviews. And yes, kind of this is under the auspices of Solace, but I've done those independently as well. So my views on this are both kind of based on the immediate benchmarking and the research that I've done, but then also the experience of seeing the way that other councils are operating and have operated, both kind of through austerity and out the other side, and many of the things that are currently being considered by a lot of councils are in this sort of space in terms of leading these sorts of strategic agendas, particularly around the place agenda. And at the risk of kind of repeating, I think that there is the current design, I think, will give you no more than marginal gains going forward. That the ambitions that are there in the corporate plan around growth and development, climate change, those sorts of things, and particularly in the context of CJCs and around where that significant funding is going to come from, will require strategic leadership to be part of that discussion. And you struggle to do that when people are a leadership structure is too thin and simply goes from one meeting to the next, simply to be at the table rather than to really lead and own the agenda. And I think that's what the proposal, particularly around the Director of Place, is all about. And I would agree very much with kind of Councillor Johnson's points around the potential scale of growth and opportunity that the role could bring in. Yes, there's kind of risk around all of that and judgments to be made, but that's kind of the purpose of the role, and it is not a new role. It's the sort of thing that exists in lots and lots of councils now, increasingly.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Penrose.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. My comments I'd rather keep for the substantive motion and to bring them forward after we voted on the amendment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Vince Bailey. You're muted.
Sorry. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to Steve James for the in-depth presentation. I'm going to speak to the amendment tabled by my colleague George Carroll. As he outlined, we can't support the proposals, and I do hope that objective and independently minded councillors in this chamber will support our amendment, which deletes points C and D, because we do profoundly disagree with the creation of 2 new turbocharged salaried appointments. I'm disappointed to hear Plaid's position on it, first of all, because the logic of Councillor Johnson's argument appears to be that the current team are failing to deliver and are incapable of delivering successful applications for funding. And to hear the leader say that the current structure is going to deliver nothing worthwhile, which is on the record, is just stunning. I get that you both want this to go through, but it's an unbelievable lack of faith in your team. And I can't believe this is the first time I'm hearing that this setup isn't fit for purpose. Instead, I'm going to focus on the positives first of all. I'd like to stress my view that we do have some of the most talented, hardworking and dedicated officers. And our opposition to this isn't a criticism of them. Indeed, the author of the presentation concludes the same. It's excellent feedback, a glowing review of our current capabilities. If anything, my concern with this is about doing the right thing with taxpayers' money. And this is a council that's consistently hiked council tax because funds are tight. It's a council that's seeking to introduce parking charges and to raise additional funds because funds are tight. We're forcing residents to adhere to a piece of legislation that hasn't been enforced in decades to sort out their drop curbs, again to raise money because funds are tight. And in some respects, I feel as if the author of this report hasn't been made aware of the sob story that we've been told about local government finance in recent years. Because I can recall a number of occasions where I've been told by cabinet members that modest improvements to bus services and play parks and roads can't be paid for because funds are tight. I've seen heads of departments arrive with metaphorical begging bowls each year to committees talking about cost pressures, and understandably so, because these are tough times. And yet here we've got proposals that would cost more than £250,000 a year to implement just to make us fit for purpose. And I do find these proposals quite curious, because one of the first things we were told during our inductions as new councillors was that the Vale is a Gold Star council, one of, if not the best performing councils in Wales. It's something I never get tired of hearing at the many meetings I've attended since joining the council in 2017. And yet in this report, we're now led to believe, and from the comments from Councillor Johnson and from Councillor Moore, we're now led to believe that we require a new high-level organisational structure to deliver the ambitious agenda set out in the Corporate Plan 2020-25. And these are jobs that come in 2022 to 2023. I don't remember, and this is why it's curious to me, I don't remember being told when the Corporate Plan was put into place that our many excellent officers and cabinet members complaining that the current infrastructure was inadequate to meet those targets. And I do understand that investment can improve things further. That's rational, it's objectively possible. But at a time of financial instability, when residents are being asked to tighten their belts and pay ever increasing council tax bills to pay for services, it seems highly inappropriate to be pressing for 2 exceptionally well-paid new council officers. So no, thank you. It's deeply inappropriate to invest in our staffing structure at this point, and it's a strange thing to be prioritising coming out of the worst pandemic that we've ever witnessed. And as a group, we won't be supporting it. And I do hope that, as I said, independently minded and objective councillors will support our amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I've got a few points and observations to make. It's very interesting the Conservatives put this motion through, because we're going to have a disjointed council, I feel, with that recommendation going through, of deletion of the posts of corporate resources and place as being 2 directors. And I just wonder where we're going to go on that, because I just can't see how we can function going forward on that. But also, I'd like to also refer to the external pressures we're all facing at the moment and how we're going to deal with it in the future. if we don't have a council fit for the purpose. We have seen at the moment, you know, chaos outside in our roads because, and I think this is largely due to the impacts upon Brexit. We also got the impact, of course, of climate change as well, and we cannot ignore that. And it's not going to go away if we don't do something about it, and we got to do something about it now. And of course, the other big issue, of course, that we have faced in the last couple of years, or almost a year and a half now, getting on for 2 years, is COVID, of course. And we got to also have a council that's fit for purpose in trying to deal with the upshot of COVID. And we've got some real serious issues here. We've got to have officers that are visionary and not just deal with the functions that we need to deal with every day, because I think they do their job. But I think our officers, our senior officers, to use a petrol euphemism, are running on empty at the moment. They are exhausted. They are tired. And to be honest, we need them reinvigorated. We need them to concentrate on strategy, okay, rather than just operational stuff. And I think what Ian Johnson really summed it up. We're going to have a future whereby we're going to have these new joint committees, corporate joint committees, and we need to be head of the table. We don't want to be the back of the table asking for breadcrumbs. We want to have the real bread. And my concern is we're going to be back at the agenda if we just only focusing on functions rather than strategy. And I think that's what we need to be looking at. And we need to be looking at our future direction. So, you know, I'm thinking of this as an investment for the future, not just now, but an investment. You don't just investment in land and buildings, you invest in people as well. So I'm fully opposed to the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marnie, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll start off by once again pointing to this report, which I referred to earlier as 23 pages of drivel, in my opinion. I should have added local authority speak drivel. Once again, we have a document there that I think most people could have put together in a page and a half without the constant repetition, local authority speak, and phrases that are alien to the outside world, to be perfectly honest with you. So I'd say that. And what a surprise then. We have a consultant steeped in local authority whose recommendations at the end are to enhance the ever-expanding opportunity for public authority executives on the merry-go-round to enhance their job prospects and bank balances while the rest of the country struggles. What a surprise. I could have written that for you. I don't know if you paid any money for this. I could have done that for you for nothing, to be perfectly honest with you. I endorse some of the comments here, although I'm no great fan of the Conservative Party in any way, shape or form, with some of the comments they've made here about we're battered week in, week out, I should say, with how fantastic this council is. It's first in this, it's second in that, it's brilliant at that. Even within this report, that's all we get, page after page, fantastic, brilliant. And yet, I seem to recall, I know we're faced with this, but I seem to recall when the current MD, the successful candidates a few years ago, was presented to us, there's no mention from him that I can recall, and I do stand to be corrected, that he wasn't happy with the directorship setup or the number of managers, or that he'd struggle on his own. There's nothing from the administration then saying the same. And yet everything since would be fantastic. Under pressure, of course you're under pressure, everybody's under pressure in their jobs. And yet all of a sudden we need to spend the best part of £300,000 on 2 more senior executives. Well, I can say without fear of contradiction that the people of the Vale of Glamorgan, the ratepayers, they would much rather see a dozen bin men and women of place rather than 2 overpaid extra chief executives, or 2 dog fouling and litter wardens of place rather than 2 overpaid extra executives, which were vaguely informed that they may or may not bring in some of their salary in the pages of that report. Well, I know where the smart money would be on that one, and I know where my money would be in that one. It's absolutely an insult to the people of the Vale of Glamorgan We keep getting hit with the tax rises, the council tax rises imposed by this administration, to suggest that you're going to create 2 jobs costing £280,000. Let's have some people weed in the pavements, which every single community in this country have been walking through waist-high weeds. We'd rather see that than another 2 chief executives, or not chief executives, senior executives. I mean, who came up with director of place? That didn't make sense. You know, you wonder sometimes that councils and councillors and politicians are held up to ridicule. It's coming out with stuff like that, director of place. We're being lumped with an extra 5 councillors when the people are demanding less politicians, and now you're trying to create 2 highly paid executive jobs. It's an absolute and utter joke, and you should all be ashamed of yourself, quite frankly. If we're doing too well, we're doing fine as we are, and we cut our cloth accordingly. And if you say we're doing fine, which is what you keep telling us every week, we're doing fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Robertson.
Thank you, Lady Mayoress. I'd like to, Lady Deputy Mayoress. I'd like to endorse everything that actually Councillor Marley has just said, and what Councillor Bailey said. I think the timing for this is wrong. I think we're not in the right place to be doing this. I've heard a lot about how the council is struggling, how the management of the council is struggling. It seems to me that the officers in the council have done a remarkable job over the last 18 months, 2 years during the COVID crisis. But I don't think this is the right time. I think this would actually be a slap in the face for the residents of the Vale of Glamorgan, who are trundling along over really badly maintained roads, who are seeing their services cut, who are having major problems. I mean, it's not just the council officers and the councillors who are having problems at this time. It's the residents. The residents have had an awful time over the last 18 months. And to tell them that they are going to have to foot the bill, rather than having potholes filled in, that they're going to have to foot the bill for 2 extra echelons of management, I do not think is going to go down well. And I cannot back it. I think it's also an insult to the junior members of the officer staff of the Vale of Glamorgan Council, who have worked incredibly hard and are now going to see £280,000 being spent on 2 unnecessary, at this time, levels of management. I was a bit confused by Councillor Wilson altogether. I think he might have been actually asking for a new director of COVID as well. I'd just like to ask Mr. James one question, and this is serious. Have you read Parkinson's Law, Mr. James? Thank you.
If you would like to answer that, Mr. James.
No, I haven't.
Okay, thank you. Moving on then, Councillor Rowland.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to say, well, first of all, I didn't quite catch everything Councillor Johnson saying. I know he's a very passionate politician, but though if he could either calm down or slow down, that would be great. My question is more to do with the leader, and the leader keeps referring to the report. Now, if you go on the cabinet, if you go on the council meeting, it just says 2 references. There's no actually report. You have to physically go into the cabinet meeting to get the report. So there's a transparency issue there. And maybe it would be wise for, for the public, if they wanted to read it, to actually put the report on the meeting tonight. But my question is to the leader. £280,000 is quoted for 2 cabinet, 2 directors from the start of May. But if you're going to employ someone in Q4, that's an extra £70,000. So do you know when these 2 directors, if it gets passed this evening, when these 2 directors will be put in place? Is it going to be 280,000, or is it going to be 280,000 plus £70,000?
Would you like to answer that, Councillor Moore?
Depends on If we agree this tonight, it depends on when the adverts go out. It then depends on the recruitment process, and it depends on those who are appointed and whether or not they're working somewhere else, and whether or not they have to give notice from their previous job. So I really couldn't tell you, but I would hope that we would get them in place within Q4, because what we really do need to do is to ensure that this is up and running for the next council to move forward. And to say you couldn't find the reports, then, well, they're there. All I can say is all you got to do is read them.
Thank you. Okay, so if you have already spoken, could you take your hand down, please? Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I just, I want to speak against the amendment. As the leader laid out earlier, this has been a long process. I think it has been a very clear and transparent process. I think there have been many stages where members have been able to get involved. And I think to hear members refer to being well briefed, I find it a little surprising that this amendment reads as it is. I personally thought maybe there was going to be an amendment to just have one extra director to cover all the operational side and allow the chief executive role to be, more free. But no, just simply to change the name of it, but not allow the chief executive to have any ability to do the strategic things that is laid out in the report seems a bizarre amendment to make. As coalition partners, I want to just state we're completely in support of this approach. I think it's worth saying this is to launch a consultation process with staff. So there's been much mention made of, I wonder what the staff will think. I wonder how this is going to be. We'll know before council gets to finally approve this, because that is the process it's going into. So I feel assured, and I wish to make that point very clear. As I say, the amendments ill conceived, it will achieve nothing towards the aim of the report, i.e. the substantial restructure of our strategic leadership. And as it doesn't seek to do that, we simply can't support it. I do hope we can vote on this amendment shortly, and we can go back into the substantive debate about some of the points there. Just a final point on the work all the staff and all the directors have been doing. I think everybody is in agreement about how hard everybody has worked during the pandemic and to this point. Working in regional agendas as I do as chair of the RPB, I can see how things are moving for the council to need to have that external focus as well, and the ability to structure itself to engage with things for the benefit of the health of local people and indeed for the council to be able to get involved. I associate myself and thank Councillor Johnson for his comments. I think I heard them. They were slow enough for me to hear and understand. And I think the public heard them as well. No need to repeat those, but I'll be voting against this amendment. I would like to call a recorded vote on the amendment. I think I'd like to see exactly who thinks this is an appropriate way to go with leadership. And I'm sure that I'll get support from every single one of the Conservatives who are putting it forward. I can see from Councillor Bailey there. But as no one had called it, I thought I'd make the point of calling a recorded vote. Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Right, Councillor Sandra Perks.
Thank you. As one of the councillors here that has actually worked for the Vale of Glamorgan Council, and I worked for the Vale of Glamorgan Council for 15 years, and I've seen many changes over that time, to actually have austerity hit and see directors going, it actually had a terrible detrimental effect on the staff, because the staff also, many staff also left due to austerity that was brought in by the Conservative government in Westminster. So I'm not surprised that the Conservative Party have actually put this amendment forward. They are the party of small government after all. And I think we need to be forward thinking. We need to be actually supporting our directors, supporting our senior staff. They can't carry on at the capacity that they're working. We have to have people in place who are forward thinking, proactive, positive, economic development, regeneration. We need the money in our towns in the Vale. We need the money in the rural Vale. And we're not going to get that by just keeping to 3 directors and 1 who's going to be the chief executive. It's nonsense. This amendment is nonsense. And obviously I'm not going to be supporting it. And I think we need to support our staff in the Vale and support the directors and make sure that they have the capacity to do the work, the strategic work that we need them to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perks. Right, Councillor Moore, and then I think we'll be moving to a vote. You're on mute.
I know. I'm trying to do 2 things at once, and you can't do that, can you? I'm just bemused by some of the comments that have been made. Our management staff are exceptional, and I have told you that. I continue to say that they are exceptional. But in the last 18 months, 2 years, they are now on their knees. And the problem is things go forward, and we expect more and more from them. But the trouble is that the capacity is getting reduced by the day. To be fair, and when I said we would achieve nothing, I mean nothing new, because we're not going to achieve anything new unless we have a strategy to go forward. Unless we go forward, we are going to manage decline, which is what I said originally. In terms of things like people complaining about council tax raises, I will, again, as I always do, will remind you, we still don't spend out to SSA, the standard spending assessment, which is what the Welsh Government say we should be spending to. We do not reach the level of Welsh average council taxes. So, it's something I've gone on about for years. In terms of charging services, people are saying, why are we now charging services? Well, do you think it's about time we actually did do pay for some of the things and get people to pay for some of the things that they rely upon? Yes, but a lot of them, for example, Barry Island, Ogmore, Cosmoston, people have been coming there for years and years and not paying a penny towards its upkeep. Yet they expect it, and our residents expect it. And so what we've done, and that took us a long time, and we had all-party agreement, if you remember, over those charges. Let's not forget this. So you can come in later and talk about why we're putting some prices up, because we have to in order to go forward. In terms of saying we'll have turbocharged salaries is an insult. I think what you need to do is start looking around and see what other authorities are paying, because we don't pay the most. I'm telling you that, but we do have the best officers. But again, I will come back to the point that we made earlier, is that the current managing director has too many reporting lines, and it's impossible. He works 24 hours a day, I think, to be honest. If you ever see emails off him, he gets them late at night and very early in the morning. When he sleeps, I just do not know. And in terms of things like Ian mentioned, the levelling up fund, the Conservative government have put this levelling up fund, which in my mind is a bit of a sop, on the basis that when it's a bidding war, that's what it is, and it's trying to circumvent the Welsh Government and the democratic process that we have here in Wales. So, and if you really do want us to do that, then we have to strategically work not only with Welsh Government, not only with the 22 authorities in Wales, not only with the Welsh Government Association, but also with the UK Government. And to do that, you need the capacity. And you need the capacity and the capability of the officers to do it. And it has to be at a strategic level. Now, if you don't get that, then I don't understand. You don't understand local government. You don't understand the way things work. So I will obviously oppose this. And I just do not understand where some of you are coming from. I'm terribly sorry.
Thank you. OK, we're going to move to a vote. Do we have 6 people asking for a recorded vote, please?
Sorry, Madam Mayor, does the tabler of the amendment not get a chance to respond?
Yes, I apologise for that. Yes. So let's go back to Councillor Carroll, please.
OK, thank you very much, Madam Deputy Mayor. It's disappointing that I'm not going to be receiving unanimous support for this amendment, and I think given the remarks of some members of various groups, I think in reality it's likely to fail, but I'm pleased that it'll be going to a vote anyway. To address some of the remarks made by members, we've heard a few references to the levelling up fund. I think that the idea that the Vale of Glamorgan somehow won't be able to bid for the Levelling Up Fund or won't succeed if it's not for having these new six-figure salary posts, I think is quite bizarre, to be honest with you. I think that we do have existing capacity within our management structure to be able to make good and successful bids, and I would sincerely hope that takes place. It's quite absurd to suggest that any bids would be jeopardised, as I think Councillor Johnson did, unless we have these new directors in place. I don't agree with that, and I do think that our existing management are able to make such bids and do so effectively. And I think that our existing cabinet should have confidence in themselves to be able to direct and lead on that point. The leader's reference to price rises and the fact that they've had to go up, I think, were his words. In that case, I would simply ask, well, where is the money going to come from to pay for these new salaries? I think that when we have to prioritise, I think that we should work with our existing management structure rather than bring in these two large salaried positions. As I've said, my comments and my position on this are in no way a reflection on the existing team. I think they've worked incredibly hard, and I think that is something that we can all agree on, Madam Deputy Mayor. And with regard to Councillor Johnson's point about the appointments process and whether the Conservative group would be participating in that were these positions to be created, then the answer to that is yes, of course we would do. I mean, we have to work within the parameters of what's in front of us. I sincerely hope that these director roles are not created, but if they are, then I think we have a duty to participate in that process. So I urge all members to support the amendment. I appreciate members' comments so far, but I would hope that we could gain their support on that.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we're going to move to a recorded vote now. Is everybody clear on what the amendment is, please? Does anybody want to have it read again?
I would like to, please, Kevin Marnie.
Okay, thank you. Could you do that again for us then, please, Councillor Carroll?
Yes, Madam Deputy Mayor, the amendment is to delete points C and D as proposed by the leader. That is point C, the creation of a director of corporate resources, and point D, the creation of a director of place. I propose the deletion of both of those.
Okay, is everyone clear on that now? Okay, we're going to go to a recorded vote then, please.
Okay, members, we are now going to start a recorded vote, commencing with, for the motion, commencing with Councillor Julie Aviat.
Against the amendment.
Councillor Vince Bailey.
For the amendment.
Councillor Rhiannon Birch.
Against the amendment.
No.
Councillor Jonathan Bird.
Against the amendment.
Councillor Bronwyn Brooks.
Against the amendment.
Councillor Liz Burnett.
Against the amendment.
Councillor George Carroll.
For.
I can't say I'm happy in voting for an amendment, but like we've put forward, but
Sorry, Councillor Kemp, can you mute until you're asked to vote, please?
Councillor Janice Charles.
For the amendment.
Councillor Amelia Collins.
Against the amendment.
Councillor Jeff Cox.
Against the amendment.
Councillor Robert Crowley.
For the amendment.
Councillor Pam Drake.
Against the amendment.
Councillor Vince Driscoll.
For the amendment.
Councillor Stuart Edwards.
For the amendment.
Councillor Ben Gray.
Against the amendment.
Councillor Owen Griffiths.
For the amendment.
Councillor Stephen Griffiths.
For the amendment.
Councillor Tony Hampton.
For the amendment.
Councillor Sally Hanks.
Against the amendment.
Councillor Nick Hodges.
Against.
Councillor Hunter Jarvie.
Against.
Councillor Gwyn John.
Against.
Councillor Dr. Ian Johnson.
An Erbyn. Against.
Councillor Gordon Kemp.
For.
Councillor Peter King.
Against.
Councillor Kevin Marnie.
For.
Councillor Catherine McCaffer.
Against.
Councillor Anne Moore.
Against.
Councillor Neil Moore.
Against.
Councillor Michael Morgan.
Against.
Councillor Rachel Nugent-Finn.
For.
Councillor Andrew Parker.
Against the amendment.
Councillor Bob Penrose.
For the amendment.
Councillor Sandra Perks.
Against the amendment.
Councillor Andrew Robertson.
For the amendment.
Councillor Leighton Rowlands.
For the amendment.
Councillor Rupert Sivignanum.
Against.
Councillor John Thomas.
Against.
Councillor Neil Thomas.
Against.
Councillor Stephen William.
An Erbyn. Against.
Councillor Margaret Wilkinson.
Against.
Councillor Eddie Williams.
Against.
Councillor Mark Wilson.
Against.
Councillor Margarita Wright.
For.
Thank you. That concludes the recorded vote. We'll just go to some tallying up. So it's 17 for the amendment and 28 against the amendment.
Okay, so the amendment falls. We'll now return to the substantive motion, please. Okay, I don't know if the original proposer wishes to speak to it or whether you wish to leave your comments till later.
Normal practices, I sum up.
Okay. In that case, Councillor Bob Penrose, please, followed by Councillor John Thomas.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The point I'd like to make is that I am not opposed to senior staff management recommendations, but I am opposed to the payroll being increased by the amount of these two positions. I, like a lot of councillors, would have a job justifying it to the residents in my ward as to why we're paying these amounts. But if it can be reconfigured inside the existing payroll amounts, then that should be quite achievable. It's the sort of thing we had to do in the private sector. So I can't see why that can't be applied to local authority. What I do find rather ironical is that in 2016, I proposed to the previous administration at that time that we had a director of marketing. That was poo-pooed. When I was in cabinet myself, I proposed it again and it was kicked into the long grass, and now we're calling it a director of place, and it's my idea, so perhaps we should run with it. I find that quite ironical. The statement in the report that said half the salary of the director of place will be achieved by additional income. I sat for 2 years on the income generation board. There were lots of very good ideas put forward, none of which were ever taken up or followed on. And really speaking, there'd have to be quite a cultural change for, if this position is created, for the council to act on it anyway. Accordingly, I will not be supporting the substantive motion. The other thing I consider is, as we're so close to an election, I think it'd be wrong for this administration to even propose these changes, and that it should be left until a new administration comes in May and let them, because after all, you're going to saddle them
with your preferences, and quite a lot of you probably won't even be elected again. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor John Thomas.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Can I firstly say that I did hear every word that Councillor Johnson said, and I wouldn't often say this, but I did agree with every word that he said today as well. Having sat in the leader's seat for 2 years and worked alongside the managing director, I understand the pressures that are on the senior management team. You've only got to look at the pressure that was on through attending the city deal meetings and everything else that went with that to see, how difficult the role is to achieve. And with the new joint committees being proposed as well, this can only get worse. We do need to evolve. We have consistently been judged the best performing council in Wales, but things are moving forward and we need to move forward with them. And that is to enable us to remain the best or one of the best performing councils in Wales. I think it's important that the managing director role becomes a chief executive's role, and it's important then that he is not running a directorate himself. That the directors answering to him, reporting to him, and he is able to do the job as been mentioned by everybody else tonight. The strategic role, which the chief executive's role would be. I think it's it may be difficult to argue to some people the increase in the wage bill due to this, but the figures have been bandied about tonight, and I worked them out quickly, and it works out the actual increase at being 0.07% of our budget. I'm sure that we can quite easily get that back through improved performance as time goes on. So I will certainly be supporting this motion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, in some ways it's refreshing to see the kind of passion that we've seen tonight, but I do come back to the point I made when we discussed the amendment that we tabled, because it's relevant to the substantive motion as well. 1 minute, it's all brilliant, and the Vale is the best thing since sliced bread, and yet suddenly the team cannot achieve anything without increasing capacity. You've got Councillor Perks said we need forward thinking. The leader says we'll achieve nothing worthwhile without these changes. Mark Wilson says we need visionary officers. Ian Johnson pretends to believe that we'll never successfully apply for funding again without these changes, all of which is to imply that the management team needs new blood. So it will be interesting to see if these are indeed external appointments, should this all go through. But most of all, this is about what's right for the public. So instead of pretending to be angry when people don't agree with you, how about taking the time to show us and to show the public how these appointments will pay for themselves? I've heard little to suggest that this would be the case. Councillor John Thomas just described it as 0.7% of the overall budget. Yet I've heard cabinet members say they can't afford to pay for play parks to be improved this year unless we find the funds. Show us where the funds will come from. And that's much smaller proportion of funding. So as far as I can see it, having sat through committees I've chaired, we've already picked all of the low-hanging fruit in terms of savings. And so I do want to ask, where is the cash coming from? Which road improvement will be shelved to pay for this? Which play park does get rolled over into the next financial year? Are the salary costs for this going to form part of the inevitable council tax increase that you come back to us and ask for next year? And for all those reasons, I'll be voting against, and that's on the basis of points C and D.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Marnie.
Thank you. I'd just like to ask that my comments on the amendment are carried through as read for the same argument here. One thing I would like to say, I'm in agreement with Bob Penrose, that I've absolutely no objection to as many new posts as possible being created, as long as it's within the existing wage framework of the council. I feel quite sure that the members of the cabinet would take a substantial cut to fund this. Whether you'd have the same agreement with the departmental managers, the directors and the MD, I don't know. But surely if this is going to bring in so much extra money to the Vale, then you'd only have to carry that burden for, shall we say, a year to 18 months at best. Well, what a great gesture that would be for you towards the people of the Vale of Glamorgan. One very last thing I would like to say, I have to say this in response to Neil Moore's earlier comments, when he mentioned that the introduction of charges at parks and God knows what else, car park and all that of it, had all party support. It might well have, but I should highlight, and I felt he should have at the time, that it didn't have the support of all the independents. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Burnett, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I mean, fortunately, we come to this debate from a position of strength, and I won't revisit that except to say that not only have we delivered our usual high standard, but a whole range of extra support during the pandemic. But there remain many challenges ahead for the council and for our communities. We've heard about austerity. That's meant we've cut 59 million from our budget, and we know where that's come from. And in 2019, the UN Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty actually said that much of the glue that's held British society together since the Second World War has been deliberately removed and replaced with a harsh and uncaring ethos. Again, where's that come from? We know that our communities have been badly affected by the pandemic, and with the forthcoming end of furlough, cut in universal credit and increase in national insurance, the public services we provide for the people of the Vale will not only be essential, they will be the crucial foundations of the lives of many. We need to make sure they are strong and resilient. And we need to drive forward the rural regeneration agenda, because when Brexit has pulled the rug out from under the amazing work locally driven by our rural regeneration team and their local action group, are we going to accept the Brexit demise of that brilliant initiative that has influenced so much of what is good in this organisation? Not on my watch. But alongside the challenges, there are also opportunities to look to the future. And that's where the role of Director of Place is important. In the Vale, we're fortunate to have many individual and special places, and we need to support them. The focus of our last corporate plan was strong communities with a bright future. And more recently, if you want to read it, Councillor Kemp, it's working together for a brighter future. That plan is challenging and ambitious, and we are ambitious. Why else would we have a £135 million school building programme, a social enterprise catering company that turned a £350,000 deficit into a £500,000 surplus that invests in our school and their children, our schools and the children, a programme of council house construction, a strong communities fund to support those working to strengthen our communities? And why else would we have taken on a failing listed building in the middle of a pandemic and turned it into a hub of activity, if not to support our communities? There's a list as long as my arm, or actually no, my arms, of things we want to do, but that needs investment, and we need leaders able to do that. We've heard about the increasingly regional agenda. We're ambitious to not only play a part, we want to be a key player to ensure the Vale's needs are fully heard and the Vale gains investment. And we need a programme of community wealth building where council spend is recycled into our communities. Last week, I told council of how in our 21st Century Schools programme, 82% of the construction spend, 85% of the workforce is in Wales, 48% from the postcode, 154 new full-time jobs and 86 apprenticeships have been created. I want that replicated across all our procurement spend. More. We need to build the schools and homes we need, the transport infrastructure and the jobs to support our communities. And we need to meet the challenges of climate change, and we need to do that in partnership with our communities. I believe this structure will allow us to deliver for our communities, and therefore I am pleased to second the motion. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor King.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think I wasn't going to speak, but I think there is a distinction between having more funding to do more repairs to potholes, more repairs to roads, more pavements, more 20-mile-an-hour trial zones, more parking restrictions, more active travel support, and having none. And I fear there was a conversation earlier that implied that we were not doing those things. What I would say is that the service area for which I have responsibility has and continues to deliver to the maximum. And I am absolutely in awe of all that they have done, and particularly with things like maintaining waste and recycling and food waste collections through the most difficult period imaginable. and overspending considerably, but that's a debate for another night. But our biggest challenge is having the staff and the capacity to deliver. And what has become an increasing problem of late has been obtaining some of the parts, because the whole supply chain has broken down. And what I'm desperately hoping for is that this is going to lead to a much more strategic arm to the organisation, which will help us in that delivery. So I that's my only concern. It's not that we're not doing things; it's that we want to do yet more. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak? Because if not, I'm going to ask Councillor Moore to sum up, please. Councillor Moore?
Thank you very much. I think it's been a good debate. I would make some points about the fact that, you know, John Thomas made the point about the pressures that he saw when he was leader, but again, that was before COVID, and life has moved on slightly since then too. Things have become exceptionally difficult. We do need to evolve. We do need to move forward. And it is a good point about how much it is on the budget. And in terms of things like, and there's a comment in the bar which is disgraceful. We've already written the advert is absolutely disgraceful because we haven't. But it also reconfiguring within our own current budgets. That's really, you know, that's kind of what we're kind of doing in some respects anyway. Because if you read within in the fourth quarter, it will cost us £72,000, which we will pay out of our current budgets. But in order to reconfigure jobs, that doesn't achieve what we're trying to aim. The aim is to have a strategy and to have a strategic lead, which will help us to go forward. You know, we are one of the best authorities. We are the best authority, and we have to continue to do that. And in terms of the director of marketing, I'm certainly not the same as the director of place. I'm terribly sorry, but it isn't. And one thing I'd like to say is I need to apologise to Steve for some of the comments that have been made, and I just wondered, in summing up, whether or not Steve would like to have the last word on this, because I think, to be honest, he's giving you things, warts and all. One of the biggest things in terms of like reconfiguring the budget to have jobs elsewhere is that all those reporting lines are still going to be there, and perhaps he would like to give his idea of what a director of place actually is. And I don't know if Steve, you're prepared to come in. You don't have to, because you know, that's not what you were here for. You've come to give your report, and I thank you for what you've done. But if you want to, then please do so.
Yeah, I'm just very briefly. The debate has been really interesting and has come from all of the angles that I would have expected it to do. But for me, the report and the recommendations, recognise exactly where the authority is, which is a good place and a place of strength. But I think it's then kind of the degree to which further improvement and progress, and more importantly, the big ticket items in the corporate plan can be delivered from that structure. And in particular, it's not just around the director of place, which is about growth and development and all of the things that have been touched on today, but also the director of corporate resources, I think, is key to the overall transformation that is going to be required for the organisation as a whole to maximise the opportunities that are there around digitisation, transforming the way in which customers are served from new ways of working and beyond that as well. And all of that, I think, is equally a part of what the proposals are about and the strategic dimensions that go with that. And it isn't just about place, albeit that a lot of the discussion has been around place. I think the other role is equally important to the delivery of the corporate plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Drew.
Thank you very much. And at that, Deputy Mayor, I don't know who's got coughing out there or okay. Can I just say that we should need to put this to the vote?
Right, I would like to move to the vote. Do people wish to have a recorded vote? If so, could you
Yes,
put your
please,
hand up
Madam.
now, please? Can I see 6 people? Thank you. Right, okay, so we'll move to a recorded vote then, please.
Okay, members, this is for the original motion proposed by the leader. And that's as the cabinet recommendations set out in the bundle of papers in front of members this evening. So commencing with Councillor Julia Aviott.
For.
Councillor Vince Bailey.
Against.
Councillor Rhiannon Birch.
For.
Councillor Jonathan Bird.
For.
Councillor Bronwyn Brooks.
For.
Councillor Liz Burnett.
For.
Councillor George Carroll.
Against.
Councillor Janice Charles.
Against.
Councillor Amelia Collins.
For the motion.
Councillor Jeff Cox.
For the motion.
Councillor Rob Crowley.
Against.
Councillor Pam Drake.
For.
Councillor Vince Driscoll.
Against.
Councillor Stuart Edwards.
Against.
Councillor Ben Gray.
For.
Councillor Owen Griffith.
Against.
Councillor Stephen Griffith.
Against.
Councillor Tony Hampton.
Against.
Councillor Sally Hanks.
For.
Councillor Nick Hodges.
For.
Councillor Hunter Jarvie.
For.
Councillor Gwyn John.
For.
Councillor Dr. Ian Johnson.
Oblider Koenig for the motion.
Councillor Gordon Kemp.
Against.
Councillor Peter King.
For.
Councillor Kevin Marnie.
Against.
Councillor Catherine McCaffer.
For.
Councillor Anne Moore.
For.
Councillor Neil Moore.
For.
Councillor Michael Morgan.
For.
Councillor Rachel Nugent Finn.
Against.
Councillor Andrew Parker.
For.
Councillor Bob Penrose.
Against.
Councillor Sandra Perks.
For.
Councillor Andrew Robertson.
Definitely against the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Leighton Rowlands.
Against.
Councillor Ruba Sivananam.
Definitely for the motion.
Councillor John Thomas.
For.
Councillor Neil Thomas.
100% for.
Councillor Stephen William.
For. Obliged.
Councillor Margaret Wilkinson.
For.
Councillor Eddie Williams.
For.
Councillor Mark Wilson.
For.
And Councillor Margarita Wright.
Against. Chair, that's 28-16. 28 for the motion.
So the motion is carried. Thank you. Right, there is no other business this evening. So thank you and good night.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Steve James.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night all.